presentations left, so thanks for hanging in there and sticking around here to the end. I'm Josiah Loeks, I'm the Lehman fieldman. I'll be giving a riveting presentation on Betamix and Amaranth, so buckle up. So Betamix, there's not a whole lot left in the country. But we still get enough questions about it every year that we thought it was worth talking about today. We get a lot of questions like, how long should they save the Betamix? When would we recommend they use it? Rates, what to use with it. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions today. A little bit of the lifespan of Betamix. Came around in 1982 as a premix of phenmethan and desmethan. There's also a product that was in there called Betamix Progress, which is Betamix plus ethylfumicate, which is Nortron. Other names that it's gone by is Red Can for Betamix or Green Can for the Betamix Progress. I think what a lot of growers might still, or not a lot of growers, but some growers might still have in their shed is what Minn-Dak gave out, and it was called Betamix. Betamix is the exact same as Betamix. We get questions on that every year. It was created by Bayer in response to an injunction against Roundup Ready Sugarbeets in 2011. The U.S. registration for Betamix was canceled in 2014, and then Betamix was no longer sold at retail locations as of 2019, for the most part anyway. But there's no real time limit of the use of Betamix. So guys are wondering if they can still use it, and yes, you absolutely can still use it. We get some mixed results with it. We don't know if it's because it was being stored so long or how it's being stored. So manage expectations when you use it, but it is still worth using. How long should I continue to use store Betamix, and what weeds does it work on? This is just a slide that gives a poor, fair, good, excellent rating for which weeds, for all weeds listed. The first column is just Betamix by itself. The second column is Progress, which is Betamix plus Nortron. And then the last column is Betamix plus Stinger. So if you're trying to do the best job you can, I probably wouldn't use Betamix by itself. I would either use the Betamix Progress or make your own Betamix Progress by adding Nortron to it at 4 or 5 ounces an acre. It does change the ratings, or it changes how well it works. And when you add Stinger to it, it makes that mixture even hotter, which usually makes it work even better. And Stinger also has a more spectrum of weeds. Like you can see in this graph, ragweed, buckwheat, nightshade. When you add Stinger, it helps with all those. But usually what we're using Betamix for is water hemp, because that's the issue everybody has. And you can see if you go across there, no matter which column you're in, it only says fair to good. But if you do use Betamix, Nortron, that combination is better. You add Stinger to it. Stinger doesn't do much for water hemp by itself, but it doesn't heat that mixture up. It makes a bit of a difference. This is a graph or a slide pull from the Sugarbeet Pocket Guide. It just shows the Sugarbeet stage versus what rates you can go with. I'm not going to read off the whole slide, but it shows that the bigger your beets are, from cotyledon to 6-leaf, the more product you can use. And on the right side, it shows that if you add soil herbicides with it, you have to back off on the Betamix rate because the soil herbicides heat up that mixture. It's all about weighing the crop response versus how well you want it to work on the weeds. It's easier said than done because a lot of times you have cotyledon beets and 6-leaf beets in the same field. So it's what do you want to go after, protect your sugar beets or go after the weeds. Every situation is very different. So how long can Betamix be stored? There isn't really a for sure answer on that. Is it still good even after it freezes? And the answer is yes, as long as you can get it mixed back in a solution. To do that, you just want to move it into a warm area for a few days, shake it and move it periodically, and get it back in the solution. As long as you can do that, you are free to use it. If it doesn't go back in the solution, we suggest you not use it and get rid of it. So our suggestion to you, to wrap up the Betamix talk, is if you want to use it, just like pretty much any chemical we talk about, use it on small weeds, stuff less than 4 inches. Unfortunately, when Betamix comes into the conversation, a lot of times the water hemp is much bigger than 4 inches, and there's still some use in it in those scenarios, but I wouldn't count on killing anything, but you can hurt the weeds enough that the weeds can grow past them. But if you're really trying to kill it and do the best job you can, target stuff in more than 2 to 3 inch range, please use the Nortron with the Betamix. If you got other weeds in there, you're free to use Stinger with that. Betamix is treated, in my mind, a lot like Ultra Blazer is. So when you are using it in hot days or whatever, the environment is a big portion of how well it's going to work and the crop response you're going to see. So that is it on Betamix. A little bit on Palmer Amaranth, which is water hemp's big brother. It's an annual broadleaf. It's native to the desert, which is an important characteristic because it needs very little water to survive and thrive. This is a map that shows how much our nation is affected by Palmer, which is by looking at it, most of the country. The point of this talk is just to keep awareness up. I think any ag meeting I ever go to talks about Palmer. It's a little bit like beating a dead horse, but it's important that we all keep our eye out for it, and it's very hard to determine. So I'll go through some of that here, the idea. The next 5 slides are how do we ID Palmer versus water hemp versus redwood pigweed. We've talked a lot about in the past how to determine redwood pigweed from water hemp. One of the main ones when it's little is robo-cotyledons versus canoe cotyledons. In the top right, you can see redwood pigweed has long, thin, canoe-looking cotyledons. In the bottom right is water hemp, more short and fat cotyledons, which looks more like a rowboat. But then you look on the left, Palmer Amaranth, there's not a whole lot of distinctive characteristics, especially when it's small. So it's one of the very big challenges of IDing it. So I haven't yet to see Palmer in the field, and I hope to God I never have to, but I know it's quite easy to overlook. So take a second look. Once the plant is bigger, there's some more characteristics that stick out. The bottom left shows a guy folding over the petiole over the leaf. This is one of the stronger distinguishing characteristics of Palmer Amaranth. If you fold that petiole over the leaf and it's distinctively longer, close to twice as long, it's a good indication that it's Palmer. If it's only about as long as the leaf is, that's more than likely water hemp. And then on the right, it shows a very large flowering structure, which is usually a lot bigger than water hemp, 18 to 24 inches for Palmer. So 2 ways to identify it when it's bigger, but that can be a scary picture. The next couple slides here are sometimes characteristics of identifying Palmer. This yellow line points to a spine. You can see it on the tip of the leaf. Now this is inconsistent. It's not in every Palmer, so just because it doesn't have it doesn't mean it's not. But it's one thing a guy can look out for. Next is the spiny bracts, where the petiole reaches the stem. Now this is another characteristic just like the last one, where it's not on every plant, but it can be a way to help determine it. Don't expect to see it every time. This is a picture of the seeds of redwood pigweed versus Palmer Amaranth. When I look at that, I see pretty much no differences, and that's the point, is that you're not going to be able to tell it from the seeds either. So from seeds to seedlings, it's very hard to tell. You can notice some things when it gets a little bit bigger, but by then the problem is kind of too hard to control. So the status of Palmer Amaranth in Minnesota. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture had 94 sites in 22 counties in 2016. 60 sites were parcels of land where seed allegedly was contaminated with Palmer Amaranth. When they were investigated, 34 34 were real, 60 were something else. This is one thing that Minnesota does fairly well on, is that when Palmer is found, they send the cavalry in, not just hand pulling, they send flamethrowers and the whole shebang at it to try to get it taken care of. And they also investigate as much as they can the infestation, where the infestation started, the pathways, how it got there. We'll talk about the pathways a little bit later. This is an interactive map. If you go to amaranthaware.com, you can look at this map. This one's actually from 2021. It shows the different counties where Palmer has been found. Just because I was interested in it, I went to amaranthaware.com, and they do have a 2022 map on there with a couple counties that aren't shown on here. There was one in the very southern border of Minnesota called Freeborn County, and then right next to Clay County, Becker County had some found last year as well, and those were new sites. But there were six counties in 2022 that still had Palmer, which were Polk, Clay, and Becker County in the northwest, and then Freeborn, Goodhue, and Houston County in the southeast. So those are continuing to be monitored. If you went on this map, when you click on a county, the screen shows up and gives some descriptions on it. And when you go through them, it tells you when they investigated where the source was that they determined it came from, whether it was cropland or not. A bunch of interesting information. But when you click through these, a lot of them say screenings for the source or feed for the source. Those are a couple common pathways of where Palmer amaranth is introduced in our area. This is a map of North Dakota. They have 19 counties that have reported Palmer, with the first starting in 2018. If you look at the map, it's color-coded. The blue is previously found but no longer detected. The green is previously found and still detected. And the red is detected in 2022 and will continue to be monitored. From what I was told, there's a pretty active site in Richland County. It was not found in a Sugarbeet field. It was found in some grassland area. So don't just be looking in your fields, be looking anywhere weeds can come. So why is Palmer such a big deal that we keep talking about it even though nobody really has it yet? Well, these are the reasons why. It's because it's such a fast growing plant, it's so competitive, and has a high water use efficiency, which goes back to being a desert plant. If it gets enough rain to germinate, it can set seed with just that amount of moisture. It doesn't really need much more. It's such a prolific seed producer, and because of how it's made up, it's already resistant to a lot of popular chemistries that we use. So all these characteristics could be used to describe water hemp as well. It's just Palmer amaranth does it better every step of the way. So it's a scary thought, and that's why we keep talking about it, is keep up awareness for it. The next few slides, we'll go through a couple of these bullet points. It shows the differences between water hemp and Palmer. This one, this chart tracks the growth rate. The yellow line on top is Palmer amaranth, and the black line on the bottom is water hemp. You can see that the yellow line, the Palmer amaranth line, increases much faster, much quicker. It says there that Palmer can grow 1 to 2.5 inches a day versus water hemp growing at 3/4 of an inch and a quarter per day. I know when I'm looking at water hemp in the field, I see it one day it's 2 inches, I seem to look the next day and it's like 1 foot tall. So with Palmer amaranth going twice as fast, something that we don't want to have to deal with. And once it gets to the flowering, you can see towards the top it plateaus and doesn't grow nearly as much. This chart shows the percent yield loss of comparing red oak pigweed versus water hemp versus Palmer. So Palmer's all the way on the right. You can see that it's about 25% more yield loss than water hemp. So water hemp's bad enough, and 25% more yield loss on top of that is a scary thought. So these are what Palmer amaranth is already resistant to. On the right side, it shows the common name, Pursuit, 2,4-D, atrazine, Roundup, Flexar, and Callisto, all very popular chemistries in our area. And not every polymer plant will be resistant to all these at the same time, but they all have the capability of that already before we even have it. One of the reasons is that water hemp and polymer alike are both dioecious, meaning that they're male and female flowers in separate plants. It makes for a genetically diverse population, which is not good for us. I'm not going to spend too long on this slide. Just in the bottom right-hand corner, it talks about the Sugarbeet price difference between having polymer water hemp versus not having it. And all I want to say on it is that it's going to cost you a heck of a lot more. Well, a lot of guys are dealing with water hemp already, and the program's similar between polymer and water hemp, but it's going to cost you twice as much to try to control the weeds, or more. Now, I mentioned before when I had the state of Minnesota slide up there about the pathways. And on the left-hand side here, identified sources. It's got 4-year seed, screenings, manure, and feed. Those are just some of the more common pathways. When you clicked on that interactive map, it would tell you this information. A lot of it was screenings, but there was some feed. There was one in southern Minnesota that came on and said egg seed as well. So these aren't the only ways, they're just some of the more common ways. So if you got livestock and you're dealing with manure, it's something definitely to watch out for from where you're getting your feed. If you're getting your feed from out of state, try to ask some questions about the processes that they go through to see if you're protected against polymer. Because that's one way that it's being introduced. So just a little bit on dairies, since we have so many popping up on the southern end of Minn-Dak. I think they do a pretty good job with this, but I don't know for sure. It's worth asking them some questions. But this is a picture from Nebraska where Palmer Amaranth is not considered a noxious weed. You can see that Palmer Amaranth sitting between the bales. If somebody in our state were to buy this bale of hay and bring it to their farm, you'd have Palmer in a hurry, and then so would your neighbors. So it's something you want to protect yourself and your neighbors against, something like this. Not picking on any livestock or dairy people, it's one of the fastest ways that it gets here. Dr. Wilson had touched in the end of her presentation about they're going to start doing some trials, I guess, with seed viability between the liquid and solid manure and anything she can find out there. That'll be pretty interesting, especially for the guys on the southern end of Minn-Dak, because we don't need any more weed problems, because water hemp's enough. So hopefully we can accomplish that. And this is just to sum up Palmer Amaranth. We showed you how to identify it, even though it's very hard to do. Please take a look, take a second look, ask us, consultants ask us. The more eyes, the better, to try to find it. We don't want to pick on anybody, but we want to make sure it's taken care of. We want to make sure we know how it got there so we can stop it from happening again. That leads to the pathways. The zero tolerance, there's a zero tolerance for Palmer in Minnesota. North Dakota has not been as gung-ho as Minnesota has been. Like I said before, Minnesota sends the cavalry in. North Dakota doesn't do quite as much, so it falls a little bit more on the grower to get it taken care of. But again, please call your agriculturalist. I think there's a saying for terrorism that says, see something, say something. Well, that is the same for this. It doesn't have to be on your own farm, neighbors, wherever you see something, please bring it up to us so we can look into it. Because we want to make sure it doesn't spread like water hemp did. We don't need another one of those scenarios around. So that is all I had. If you have any questions, please direct them towards Mesker or Tom Peters.